you bring up a good point. Money does have to be involved. It's a tool. But here's the shift in perspective. And it really comes down to leadership's ability to think differently strategically. So first off, if you're using that in your marketing materials, not in a virtue signaling kind of way, but more, hey, we are really help us help them, that sort of perspective, you're going to increase sales. That doesn't always lead to better profitability, but it's much easier to do. Another thing is you're also signaling to your employees, look, we are doing something good. We're doing this for more than just the money. And if you can accurately and adequately communicate that to your employees, they're going to be inspired. They're going to do more. They're also going to think about how can we do this differently so that it's better, so that it makes more impact. And that's where your great ideas come from. But it has to start at the top. The top has to be willing to focus on that.
Welcome to another episode of WyzeCast, the show that elevates voices, shines the light, showcases the gifts of our heart-centered guests, and amplifies the positive differences they are making in the world. Folks, I have a special treat for you today because after receiving his MBA and working for over 2 decades in the corporate world, our guest today started a boutique consulting firm where he focuses on strategic transformation. He works with leaders of mission or purpose-driven companies to help them increase not just their profits, but arguably more important, in my opinion anyway, the impact they have on the world. My name is Melanie McSally, your host for today's episode, and without further ado, I would like to give a warm welcome to the charismatic, the charming, and the thoughtful Matt McCarthy. Matt is joining us today from Florida in the USA. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me, Melanie. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good.
Awesome. So you speak a lot about measuring your mission. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so in business, there's long been a saying, what gets measured gets attention, and what gets attention gets done. But all we seem to be measuring are metrics related to typically money, or maybe time, or maybe production. And companies who are focused on achieving something, we'll just say greater than profits, often do lose sight of that greater mission. But by having measurements related to it, it puts the focus on that. Has a number of benefits, but definitely arguably can lead to better productivity and profitability. But as you eloquently said before, more importantly, more impact.
That's awesome. I often say that my currency is freedom. Because when I first started out as an entrepreneur, of course, when you're at the beginning, you're broke all the time, right? Money is going out so much faster than it's coming in. And I was always feeling bad. Like I always felt like just negative inside, like I wasn't doing a good job or what have you. And it wasn't until I realized that I didn't actually care. Well, I mean, I care, but it wasn't so much focused on how much money was in the bank. More so that I wanted to help elevate the world, help build a better tomorrow while creating sort of a sense of freedom for myself. And I don't just mean financial freedom. I mean like mental and societal and material possessions and all the freedoms, right? And so then I realized when I focused on what I cared most about, the money just started flowing because, it's just how things work, right? When you stop thinking about what you don't have, then you end up having it. So what made you start this this focus, or create this focus on mission and purpose, as opposed to just focusing on the bottom line?
So I've long had kind of a mission driven or purpose driven mindset, probably since I was a teen. But I pigeonholed myself into more of a, we'll call it a corporate way of life, or at least the standard mainstream cultural way of life where you achieve, you make money, you earn enough to retire. Obviously you buy the house, you have the 2.3 kids, so on. And I followed that line, but all along I was watching these companies, and I won't even just pick out companies, but organizations. They may be governmental or corporate, always focusing on the bottom line. And I noticed a shift in engagement. So my own engagement, other employees around me, they would literally say things like, well, all they really care about are the profits. So I'm not surprised people are getting laid off or what have you. I even noticed from an external perspective, a lot of ways that the financial incentives are driving companies to do things that really aren't healthy. I look at we'll call it the food industry, the healthcare industry, and the fitness industry. They are cycling the same ideas, which result in really an unhealthy lifestyle. We're no longer eating foods that came out of gardens or what have you. We're eating foods that come out of factories. And we are treating the resulting health issues with medications that likewise came out of factories, which may have dubious outcomes, even according to the studies. And why would companies do that? It's really coming down to the financial incentives. So we're going to manufacture something that's less expensive for us to make. Oh, but it sells, so we can make it more profitable. Oh, and we also engineer the foods to be addictive. And that's been proven. This is, I'm not making conspiracies up. It's been proven. And yet those foods are contributing to, we'll say, inflammatory states and chronic diseases. Again, that's been linked. So rather than spending the money on these things, a normal human being can go back and make lifestyle changes. Sometimes they're harder than the treatment, but still lifestyle changes. And without incentivizing the system, they can become more healthy. So that's a long-winded example, but I observe those things. And again, as an employee, as an observer, and realize, look, I've been supporting this all my career. Is that aligned with my values? No, it's not. What is aligned with my values? Well, I would love to say all the corporations should no longer put their focus on money and so forth. That's never going to happen. But what can I do? I'll use the analogy of if you have a lawn, sometimes you'll see weeds crop up. You can use weed killer and leave bare patches. Or you can use a good fertilizer and make the lawn more healthy. It will crowd out the weeds. Now, in this case, we have more weeds than lawn, but you can still build more lawn and kind of start squeezing out the weeds. So I decided to take it from that perspective. And so now my purpose is consulting for companies that do want to drive the good in the world, the positive impact, help them with the things that are keeping them from scaling that impact or running profitably so that they can make more impact.
I love how your analogy says that we can, it's basically, so I'm in the tech world, right? And there's the phases of rolling out tech. There's the early adopters, and then the early adopters encourage the next phase, the next phase, the next phase. So it's a similar analogy in that you're promoting goodness by getting the people doing good to outweigh the people who are not, and encouraging them to sort of shift into their more divine path, we'll just say it, you know.
Yeah.
And when I was in the corporate world myself, you know, I found that the higher you went up, it's true, like everybody's looking at the bottom line, but when you're in tech, you need to look at innovative ways to pave the path for the future. And almost always doing so is not profitable, right? In at least in the short term. And it's usually backwards, right? It's going to cost you way more at the front end. And then only if you come up with something great will that return be there. And so it's a lot of risk. And even when we were doing things that was just internal, like what systems are we going to use to support ourselves, trying things that were new, we're all often discouraged because, well, they're not tried and true. So it could end up in risk. It could end up in expenditure we don't want to pay. So every company needs money, right, to survive and to thrive and to build innovations and to help, right? And so, how can companies shift to not focusing on profits, but yet still have the money to survive and thrive?
That's a great question. So, right, you bring up a good point. Money does have to be involved. It's a tool. But here's the shift in perspective. And it really comes down to leadership's ability to think differently strategically. Okay. If they already have a mission in mind, and that's primarily who I'm working with, companies that they have their mission in mind. We do this for the world. If they have that, and yet they're focusing on the profitability already, I'm asking them to introduce another metric, or it may be a few metrics, but that's going to be directly related to the impact that they want to have. If they can calculate lives changed, if they can calculate tons of waste removed from the ocean, or I'm just giving some examples that are out there. It does a couple things. So first off, if you're using that in your marketing materials, not in a virtue signaling kind of way, but more, hey, we are really help us help them, that sort of perspective, you're going to increase sales. That doesn't always lead to better profitability, but it's much easier to do. Another thing is you're also signaling to your employees, look, we are doing something good. We're doing this for more than just the money. And if you can accurately and adequately communicate that to your employees, they're going to be inspired. They're going to do more. They're also going to think about how can we do this differently so that it's better, so that it makes more impact. And that's where your great ideas come from. But it has to start at the top. The top has to be willing to focus on that. And I'll tell you, and not to take too long on this, but I'll tell you, the cohort that's going to have the hardest time with this is the publicly traded companies. Those companies, they are pushed by the shareholders, by law, to provide profitability. That has to be their number one goal. And so that's what they measure. Now, companies that are privately held, it could be family run, it could be just a smaller number of shareholders, not publicly traded. They can be more deliberate about saying, we measure based on our impact. We also stay profitable so you get a return. But we measure mainly on impact.
Yeah, I love this because, you know, I'm a digital nomad, and there's so many governmental infrastructure issues that I run into by being a nomad. You know, for instance, it's now open enrollment for healthcare, and they want an address. They're saying you have to have a doctor at your physical address, and I'm currently I'm currently in Florida visiting my parents. I can give them my parents' address, but my PCP is in Boston because that's where I grew up and that's where my company is. But I can't have a PCP in Boston because I no longer have a Boston address. So this is just an example, and it happens every year. Also happens at tax season. And so I would argue, like, bigger mission, how can we change the way that public companies have to report their numbers? Like maybe their numbers are social impact, or maybe their numbers are waste cleanup or energy or saving the planet, those kinds of things. So anyway, just a sidebar of like, here's another perspective or another thing that can be changed. And I always love it when guests come on and they give advice, and I'm like, yeah, I'm doing that. And so I like to be Oz. I like to be behind the scenes. And I know you can't tell in this setting, but so my mission is to help the heart-centered businesses that have a big mission, help them get their message out there, help them save time, money, and energy so that they can make a bigger impact with less. And I can very easily track my own success on that mission based on their success, right? And usually I have to start out small, and by small I mean make affordable services available, because their budget is less, and then we can ramp up and do more over time as they're more successful. And so I see that progression, and it's good for me because it brings in lifelong partners who are making a difference in the world. So I love it. So how does supporting mission-driven companies work with your consulting business and impact your own mission?
So that is my mission. I'm measuring it a couple of different ways. One, I'm measuring the number of companies that I'm able to help, but I can also adopt their impact to some degree. Look, I can't claim, credit for doing what they do, but if I've enabled them to do more of what they can do, I measure that. The other thing that I do is I speak on measuring your mission. And that becomes not just a corporate or business perspective, but it's also ourselves at work. If we're, a W-2 employee or a, contractor, how does our impact on that company or the people in that company get measured? Or even as a personal, maybe you have outside of your work a personal passion or mission. You can measure that as well and understand if you're doing what you set out to do. Am I really accomplishing what I thought I was? And maybe you are. Fantastic. How can you even do more? Maybe you're not. And it highlights that. And maybe I think of ways that I can change that. So if I'm measuring my measure your mission, what I'm saying is how many people are hearing the message that, oh, wait, should I have a mission? To how, what is that mission? How am I going to track it? Ooh, how am I doing? So I have a number of different stages that I am measuring. So it's those two ways: companies and how many people are furthering their mission because of hearing it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because if your people are impacting the lives of other people, then you get to take credit for that, right?
In theory.
You're saying, I myself am, let's say you have 10 clients. I know you have more, but let's just say for round numbers, you have 10 clients and they impact 10 clients. Then, then you've 10x'd, right? You have a bigger impact. And, my mission is to help build a better tomorrow. And that manifests in so many different ways. But in my personal life, I like to say, like, just giving a smile to somebody who looks like they need one, or, when a customer service rep is not so nice to me, being nice to them and helping them have a better day. Like, you can in fact lead change, and you can in fact measure it on the personal level, which leads me into asking you, like, what are some examples you've seen outside of business of people having a mission and measuring that mission?
Yeah. So one example down the road from me, there is a turtle rescue hospital. So there are a number of people in our area that are passionate about the sea turtles, and yet they get injured. Sometimes it's through man-made causes. They get caught in a net, or they get hit by a boat propeller or something like that. Sometimes it's a shark bite. Sometimes it's, something else natural. Well, there are people who care enough to bring that turtle in from a boat, from the shore, what have you, bring it into this hospital where there are vets that will nurse it back to health. And then they have big release parties where they put it back out in the ocean. And this services a good 50 miles of the Florida coast, at least. So that's one way. How many turtles are we saving? And then by extension, what does that do to the ecosystem out in the ocean? You're keeping the right balance, undoing possibly some man-made negative effects. So that's just one instance.
Cool. And yeah, I love the commercial with the guy who has his Jeep and he's like paving the way on the beach for all the plastic and everything, because then the turtles are going to come in. I don't know. I just
absolutely. And there are groups that don't necessarily do it with a Jeep, but they do cleanup days. They'll every Saturday they go out at 8:00. They're carrying buckets. They may have their little pickup tongs, and they're cleaning up garbage off the beach, and that helps the whole beach ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Not to mention it's a beach nicer to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked earlier about public speaking. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about how you use public speaking to help with your own mission?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it goes to that second measurement. It's who's hearing. They may be hearing it through my podcast. They may hear it through an upcoming book that I may be in the process of writing. Not out for sale yet. But a third way is by doing public speaking in a variety of environments. This may be an association. It may be a corporate retreat. It may be a broader audience. Because if you hear it, there's really three different ways, or three different kind of niches you can measure your mission in. There's probably more, but I chose to focus on three. One is, as a business leader, how are you focusing your company's mission, and how do you use measurements to improve that? The second one would be that personal mission. What's your personal passion, and how are you contributing in that way? And measuring that and making sure that you are really having the impact that you hope to. And then the third is your mission at work. So if you're an employee and maybe your company is just generally profit driven, they're in an industry, they may be doing something cutting edge or something old school, but you have this 40-hour-a-week job that you go in and do. Well, how does it relate to your person? How do you get fulfillment through that? And that may be through supporting your fellow coworkers. So maybe you're an office worker and you go in and XYZ person has been struggling with, you name it. And you just spend a little bit of time listening to them, encouraging them. If that resonates with your values and your mission or purpose, that's a great way to do that. And I would encourage people to measure that. Now, it's not something you're going to post on your cube wall, but it may be something in your journal. hey, I got to speak to this person today. Or, maybe you managed to do it for 3 or 4 people. Those are lives you're impacting. I mean, to take it to the worst possible, that person may be so far down on their rope that they're ready to be done with life. And you may have pulled them away from that. Or maybe they just had a bad day and you made them smile. Having that kind of impact at work is really important. So anyway, going back to, I will again speak to any, it could be a group of realtors, it could be an association, it can be within a corporate setting. I plan on doing a couple of TEDx's later next year. So that's just anywhere. If you're a person, the message is for you. If you're a business leader, the message is for you. If you're an employee, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, basically what you're saying is in order to amplify your impact, people need to know it, right? People need to hear it. Because your people don't know how to find you if they don't know you exist. And so if you're out there socializing the fact that you exist and what you do, what your purpose is, that gives people the opportunity to get on board,
Yeah, and I appreciate this platform because this is a way to have a discussion about it. So I'm not just a single talking head, preaching my message. It's a platform that your listeners will also hear it. I can use it to show on social media, hey, there's, I'm not just a talking head and so forth. So
yeah, absolutely. So you speak on stages. Do you also offer stages?
oh, that's a good question. Maybe that's something for the future. I'm not setting up my own events at this point, but maybe down the road there will be a measure your mission conference. That's a great idea.
It's funny because I recently saw a little video from the founder of ClickFunnels, and they were hosting a big event, and it was for all their top customers who use their platform. And it was an event to reward the people who, I think it was $1 million, who their funnels had produced $1 million. So they gave them sort of, come across the stage and receive this award kind of thing. And I think that's great. I think that one of the things that is hard with mission-driven companies is that you see what you're doing, but you don't always know if other people see what you're doing or if other people value what you're doing. So being able to come together and talk about your mission and hear about the missions of others and sort of champion each other, I think could be amazing. Just food for thought.
That's a meal for thought. That's really interesting. Thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so you talked about bucket number 2, which was personal mission. Do you want to share? Is your personal mission different or personal passion different from your business mission?
I think for me, it's not. I've spent a lot of time thinking about corporate America, what the effect is on me, on the people around me, on the world in general. And really, I can think of nothing more important to me than to do what I can to help adjust that balance.
Yeah, I mean, the world needs it. So that's one of the main reasons why I put together this platform, is to help even more. Like you're saying, is we're in these little bubbles, and how can we make that bubble bigger and bigger and bigger? And honestly, when I first started it, it was to help the entrepreneurs and the small business owners that didn't know how to leverage podcasts and to show them the way. And I wasn't really focused on the listeners as much as I was focused on the guests and helping the guests. And then it evolved because I had the internal intention. I wasn't actually saying it out loud, that I wanted heart-centered businesses with, a mission to help build a better tomorrow. And they just were coming, and it was incredible. And I was listening to all these amazing stories, and it's just so inspiring for me, I'm very selfish on this platform. It's just so inspiring. And then, then the listeners grow, because basically this channel is just all about people sharing their heart-centered mission and how they want to help make a better tomorrow. So thank you for being here, because you're one of those people, and you're sharing how you're helping make a better.
I'm so happy to be here. And I'll tell you, it's not selfish, or rather, it's okay to be selfish in that way. If it makes you feel good, but it's doing something good for the culture, for the world, whatever the measurement is, there's nothing wrong with feeling good about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for saying that. But yeah, absolutely. So is there a final thought that you would like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I would say, if you are interested in having me speak, I think my contact information will be in the show notes. Please do reach out. Happy to chat from a business perspective. Likewise, if you're interested in having me come in, I do more than just telling you to find a measurement for your mission. It's end-to-end strategic, even digital transformation work, looking at what the holes are in your business, or barriers to scale. Happy to have a conversation about how I may be able to help. Definitely see the show notes. But in terms of a final message, look at what you're doing for a mission or purpose, and see if you can find a way to measure it. And I would love to hear about your stories. So
awesome. Yeah. So, one of the big things that I remember when I was in the higher levels, when I was working in the C-suite in corporate, but I wasn't the top notch, right? I direct reported to the top notch. And even at that level, sometimes when you're trying to influence the top leadership, it's often better to bring somebody in from the outside to bring them in as the expert in that topic. So if you're looking to shift the focus away from profitability, centered around profitability, and more so around mission, and still building your profits, but focus more on mission and the positive difference you're creating out in the world, I highly suggest that you invite Matthew McCarthy over to your business to be that expert influencer for you, and to also help just encourage, build a team around you looking to make that shift. Or if you're just looking for ways that you can broaden your impact or measure your mission, then I highly suggest you reach out to Matt. So Matt, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure having you on WyzeCast.
thank you so much for having me.
I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. If you like what you heard here today, please do like, share, and comment. We are trying to get WyzeCast to be a hot new release. So if you feel inspired, if you felt moved, if you felt called, if we earned it, please do like, share, and comment. It is free for you to do so. It really helps the podcast grow, and we really do love your engagement. This was another episode of WyzeCast, the show that elevates the voices, shines the light, showcases the gifts of our heart-centered guests, and amplifies the positive difference they're making in the world. If you want to learn more about WyzeCast, you can visit our website at wyzecast.com. We drop 10 episodes every month on the 21st, so you can binge watch or spread them out over the month, whatever suits your mood and lifestyle. Once again, my name is Melanie. It has been my pleasure being your host today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your engagement. And I invite you to come back and join me once again for our next episode of WyzeCast.